Hey everybody, welcome back to Commerce Corner. We've got a special episode this time with Art Sebastian, CEO of NexChapter. Welcome, Art. Wanted to talk today about trends. I mean, you guys are deep in the middle of it. Lots of retailers working with you guys these days. Amazing growth. What are you seeing trend-wise that we should be aware of?
Geez, Justin, that's a big question. There are a ton of trends to dig into. Why don't we start with one that's top of mind for everyone after a really, action-packed 2024, and that is retail consolidation via acquisitions. And we may all have read some of the articles that said this is the year of that we say goodbye to the 200 store chain, right? There have been some acquisitions that have happened across the board, everything from Giant Eagle selling their GetGo business unit to Delic being sold and Cefco being sold. And so just a whole lot of acquisitions happening in the industry. And if you think about it, the bigger players are looking to get even bigger, increase their scale. And scale allows them to be much more efficient with their buying and their pricing and negotiations with CPG vendors. And so I don't see acquisitions slowing. And, the challenge is when a chain's acquired by a larger chain, the independents that used to compete with that chain is now up against giants in our industry. And so they're at a disadvantage in that regard.
And we're seeing movement kind of at the top of the chain with that, right? I mean, we've got some people a little bit eyes open with what's going on with some of the biggest players in the industry.
Yeah, I think look, it's something everyone's talking about, so we might as well put it out there. The Circle K and 7-Eleven talks is certainly intriguing, and they put an offer, it was declined. They put another offer, it was declined, and now there's a lot of sort of work happening behind the scenes. We're all reading the same articles about it all. But can you just imagine what happens when the number one and two in the globe combine, if that were to happen, the amount of scale? But, it's interesting here in the US, even when you combine them, still the vast majority of convenience stores are owned by independent operators. And
Right.
so what does that look like in the competitive landscape and for consumers?
Yep. And so more actionably, as they think about that and people are reading about this, like, you're a 200 store chain, 100 store chain. What are you doing in 2025 to kind of ready yourself or to just kind of improve focusing on your customer, increase your focus on your customer to drive growth and success?
What I would do as a retailer, certainly you have to pay attention to what's happening around you. You need to be smart about the competitive environment, but ultimately you need to focus on yourself and do what you do best, which is differentiate yourself in the marketplace and serve your customers. And certainly you see a lot of retailers focused on the customer experience in the store, focused on bringing their brand to life, and very laser focused on things like food service to differentiate themselves. So that would be my advice: is do what you do best, and focus on the customer.
Yeah, and these C stores have such an advantage being, from a proximity standpoint to consumers. They're in locations that QSRs would die for at times, and so the ability to kind of produce high quality food and take advantage of even digital channels these days seems like a big advantage, and we're seeing a lot of movement there, right?
Yeah, I mean, I just love this industry, and the point you made around the proximity to customers, with over 150,000 sites across the U.S., we just have significant scale in this industry. Um, the other thing that I think about is an advantage for us is the fact that we have 160 million consumers inside of our stores on a daily basis. That's a lot of routine foot traffic in convenience stores. Um, and then finally, Justin, another big advantage that this channel has is our hours of operation. There are so many convenience stores that are open 24/7, but if you're not available to be open around the clock, there's a high likelihood you're open at 4 a.m., 5 a.m., 6 a.m. for that morning rush all the way through midnight. And restaurant chains just aren't open that many hours. Their business model doesn't allow for that. And so it gives us yet another advantage to play out as we compete for food service business.
Yeah, and we sure see that in the data with just over 60% of deliveries taking place in the kind of later than normal QSR restaurant hours and in the early hours of the morning. Um, you've been doing a lot of work in retail media of late. How do you see that playing out in 2025, and what are some of the maybe surprises or aha moments that you're seeing in that space?
Yeah, that's one of the hottest trends I've seen this year for the convenience store industry. And, retail media has been a priority for retailers of all shapes and size around the globe for many years at this point. And we know Amazon really drove the activity in this space, and then Walmart, and you get the likes of eBay and all kinds of other retailers. Even non-retail but somewhat commerce providers like Chase Bank and United Airlines and PayPal have all created their form of a retail media network, if you will. Well, there are convenience players that have leaned in: 7-Eleven, Casey's, Wawa. These are players that have announced their retail media networks. I can tell you that there are many more because we know we've worked with some of them, we've advised some of them, and so there are more out there. Here's my thought on it all, Justin, is that in the convenience store industry, retailers have the ingredients. They have some first party data. They have some advertising inventory. They have, customers in their stores on a daily basis, either filling up at the pump or coming inside. And so they have the ingredients. Um, what they need is a little bit of sort of, I call it the recipe. Like, what's the strategy? What's the change management inside the company? How do you build the plan? And once they have the recipe, they can get cooking.
Yeah, that's great. So when a retailer's thinking about how do I get started, is it time for me now? Kind of what are some of the highlights of advice that you give?
Yeah, the time is now, right? The time is now because the space is hot. CPGs and non-endemic brands continue to shift more of their budget into retail media networks so they can get closer to consumers. So the time is now. Um, the fact that convenience retailers have the ingredients and can get moving in some form and fashion. What I would say, my advice to convenience retailers is there's really no need to benchmark yourself against the news that we all read and say, hey, well, I saw this and I read that and we got to be here. I don't think that will end in a good place. What I would advise is think about what retail media is, and more importantly, what it means to you and your business and your customers, and enter the space. And as long as you drive incremental value for you, you're making progress.
Yeah, that's good advice. It's good advice. A big part of the push into advertising, retail media, digital, et cetera, is the data perspective. And you and I have talked about this in many occasions. But how do you advise retailers on what they're doing with data, from the foundations that empower them to the ways they collect them, and then kind of the cautions that go along with all the different regulations, laws, and compliances that come along with data?
Yeah, this is a super hot topic, right? There's a lot of things that marketers are dealing with. Marketers are facing, privacy regulation. I think the latest count is there's 21 states with different privacy regulation. I think most people know about GDPR overseas and CCPA here in California, but there's a different regulation across 20 states with likely more to come. There's a lot of control in consumers' hands with the iOS 14 update a little while back. Consumers have the ability to say, "Don't track me," right? So they have that control. And then, of course, cookie deprecation that has been on and off and on and off again. That has created some impact. So marketers are dealing with many challenges, and all of that has led to marketers needing to harness the full potential of first party data. And in the convenience industry, our closest in first party data set is our loyalty data. We have it. Can it be cleaned and improved and enhanced and grown? For sure. But we have some level of data. So I think that's a great starting point. But I wouldn't stop there, Justin. I think retailers need to think about, how do I acquire more data? Can I leverage customers who subscribe to my email channels or interact with me on social media or order through my e-commerce channel? Like, any way I can acquire first party data, first name, last name, email address, telephone, and then store that and unify it in some piece of technology, that gives me more knowledge and insight about my customer base to then personalize the way I talk to them, the promotions and offers I send to them, and so forth.
Yep. And all of that effort to gather the data, store the data, it really feeds into something that I know. Again, I've heard you talk about this on a number of occasions, but your current thinking on kind of the store digitization, like share a little bit more about that. Like, what are you thinking, and what are you seeing with store digitization?
Yeah, in the convenience industry, there's been a huge focus on digitizing the customer experience, I'd say the last decade. And certainly the pandemic accelerated that. So a lot of focus on things like loyalty programs and digital marketing and social media, all that stuff. I think that we need to help the stores get caught up. We need to think about, how do you digitize a store? And there's so many parts and pieces to this, Justin. I'll rattle off a few things. You want to improve the infrastructure of the store. Think about the Wi-Fi capability. Think about things like edge computing, where you unwind the hardware from the systems and that sort of thing. Um, there are digital ways to improve the customer experience. Things like self-checkout and frictionless checkout and digital payment, and even activating the pump through your mobile app while you're inside your car. And
Sure.
then there are ways to digitize your store employees. And so at the last retailer I worked at, we built custom applications for our store employees to do their job more efficiently. And, the simple way I explain it to people is, anything that's on a clipboard and requires a pen, we can replace. There's an app for that, or we could
Sure.
build an app. So,
Sure. And that is kind of part and parcel to efficiency at the store with employees, which has been kind of one of your big pushes, or consulting opportunities. Is like, how do you drive efficiency at the store level with these employees?
yeah, look, there's a couple ways to make your financial targets. One is you drive more sales, or two, you sort of mitigate your cost. And when you think about the convenience store industry, your biggest operating costs on an everyday basis is your store employee base. And so we got to do a better job maximizing our store team members. And right now, it's a challenge to recruit employees, onboard them, train them, retain them. We're looking for different skills. We're being challenged with establishing a new culture where people want to work, and giving them technology capabilities to make the job easier. And then wages and total compensation aren't going down. So, I think we often overlook the digitization of the store employee base, and it's just a tremendous opportunity. They're dealing with customers on a daily basis. You've got to arm them with technology.
Yeah, yeah, that's great advice. So thinking ahead into 2025, one of my favorite questions is a fill in the blank. If you're still doing blank, it's time for a change. What would you say there?
Geez, I mean, if you're not, there's so many ways to answer that, Justin. If you're not innovating, then you're standing still. And so, what's innovating? That is thinking differently. That is improving current processes and experiences, or creating completely new experiences. So, if you're not innovating, you're standing still. I think there have been a lot of folks that have launched loyalty programs. I think the stat is close to 70% of the top 200 stores or 200 store chains have launched a loyalty program. I would challenge that many of those chains are due for a refresh. So if you're living off of your loyalty program you created 5 years ago, it might be time to refresh the program, make it easier to use, improve the user experience so it's more modern and up to par, and then challenge the economics and the offers you put in place. Another thing, Justin, is some of the leaders in the convenience industry have leaned heavily into e-commerce, and that's order ahead for curbside pickup, in-store pickup, or delivery services. But there's still a big group of retailers that haven't gone all the way there yet. They don't understand the economics of the business and the advantage and the incrementality. I think it's a great way to attract new customers, particularly the younger ones who expect delivery services because they're used to getting it from grocers and restaurant chains.
Yep. Yeah, we definitely see stats in the 80% plus as incremental customers when it comes to the digital channels, because they're looking for food fast, they're looking for delivery fast, whatever it is. Well, that's really great advice for thinking about 2025. Any last thoughts before we wrap up?
I would just say this for any retailer who's listening is, don't be afraid, have some courage, take the leap, move forward. I have a rule inside of NexChapter, our consulting firm, which is always move forward. We don't step sideways, we don't step back, we move forward. And so that'd be my advice to retailers listening to this podcast.
That's great advice. All right. Well, thanks so much for joining us, Art. It's been a pleasure. And we'll make sure we put in all of our comments below how to get a hold of you guys in NexChapter. If you're interested in more from Lula, visit us at lulacommerce.com, and we'll look forward to seeing you on a future episode. Thanks so much.
Sounds good. Thanks.